Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for our panelists for being willing to take time out of the day to be our experts today. We're super excited to hear from Andrew, Erica, and Mark. Let me go through the quick agenda today. So we're going to start with some introductions. Let each of our participants get to know these three experts. We'll then go into our live panel conversations. They're tied around three specific themes, which we'll get to here in just a second. And then after our live panel convo, it will jump right into our open Q&A section. So a quick introduction on each of our experts today. So starting with Andrew Jones. Over the last decade, Andrew's built and scaled marketing teams for some of the world's fastest growing SaaS businesses. Most recently, he had led the marketing teams at Route and ClickUp. Years ago, Andrew got a start in marketing as an intern, where his first job was to organize the swag closet, to which, and I quote, he organized the hell out of it. He's currently the VP of marketing for Rebuy, where he oversees management, growth, performance, and efficiency of the whole marketing team there. Fun fact, Andrew has twin boys. He has never eaten a potato chip. I don't know how that's even possible. And he claims that he's a wannabe artist, and so he pretends to write, but anyone that needs proof, go and check out The Honey, which he is a co-founder of, one of the best news sources hitting your inbox each week. So definitely not a wannabe. He's amazing. We're lucky to have him here on our panel today. Andrew, go and eat a bag of Lay's. The next one, Erica Chappell. So Erica has an incredible trajectory in her work. She's been managing marketing teams previously at QIAfit, progressing through multiple leadership positions and running content marketing through a ClickUp, to now working as the director of content marketing at Flock Freight. So at Flock Freight, she spends her days building content creation and distribution strategies that helps bring her terminal-free shared truckload services to the forefront of logistics conversations, which is amazing. When not at work, she can be found outside enjoying the San Diego sun, surfing, running, or reading another self-help book. Thanks, Erica, for joining us. Last but certainly not least, Mark. Mark has an incredible work ethic, and it shows at his starting age at 12 when he started working as a paperboy. From there, at 18, moved into an inside sales career where he soon moved from a rep to a manager. After sales, he went into digital marketing, where he was the director for both Upwell and Fawn Design. Most recently, he's the co-founder of Labwork Media, For Jewelry, and Bestie Software. He manages over $1 million in spend per month and has helped numerous brands grow to 7 and 8 figures. Other fun facts, he's born and raised in Salt Lake City, where he went to the U and graduated in economics. He loves fly fishing, banjos, studying human behavior, and being a husband and dad to his 2 boys. In addition, he has just acquired a new red heeler pup, which I had to Google search, unfortunately, but was adorable. So congratulations, Mark, on the new addition to the family. So that is our lineup today. Again, thanks to all of the participants for joining us and taking an hour out of your day to learn some of the strategies that we'll be going through from each of our 3 experts. Today, the 3 themes that we're going to be jumping into is first is how to get into the marketing field. We can go through questions such as how did you get your start, any advice to people looking. A lot of questions have come up around this is how do I get back into a marketing field if I've been laid off or let go in the current economy right now. The next phase we'll enter into is how to progress once you're in a marketing field. What are the various types of roles? How do I know which one is right for me? And then lastly, for those that are wanting to make an entrance into a leadership role, whether it's team lead, director, or head of a department, how do you make that transition? And what's the best advice for those looking to do that in the near future? So after we go through these 3 main components and phases, we'll jump into the live Q&A section at the end of this panel. So let me go ahead and stop sharing, and we will get started on the questions that we have. And the first question, and because I know Andrew more closely than the other 3, and I can pick on him, and we're going to start with Andrew. I'm curious, your opinion, Andrew, someone that's looking at a marketing role, what is the most important skill set, in your opinion, that they need to get started in a marketing job?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it first comes down to size of company that you want to get into, right? There's startups that I'll speak to because obviously that's my world, that's my experience, but there's also very large enterprises, and the marketing functions, the marketing motions, the tasks, deliverables, programs, campaigns, they're all very different between the two. But speaking specifically to startups, because that's, my experience, the number one skill or need, at least that I have seen, is, I'm going to say two, is flexibility and tenacity. Like, there's so much that you can learn. You can learn it on the job. Marketing is always changing. And if you want to get into it, you want to get into it from a startup perspective, uh, being able to be flexible and also be tenacious. Like, can you see something through, and can you change? Can you pivot? Can you move? Can you be creative? Those are the skills that allow you to be successful at a startup in general, but specifically marketing. So those would be the two I would say right from the jump.
I love that. Erica, Mark, any thoughts?
I think to piggyback off of Andrew, in my opinion, marketing is evolving so quickly all the time that those like hard skills per se that you might learn in a class in college by the next semester or by the next year are kind of obsolete. And the soft skills are really what's going to carry you far in a creative role in a fast-paced environment. So I think I would agree with Andrew on that point.
Yeah. So what we do is we run a digital marketing agency, and our clients are all in kind of the e-commerce realm right now. So I can kind of speak to like the agency and then also more of the B2C side. And it really is the same story. All of your marketing platforms and your mediums are moving to like algorithmic distribution. So every company right now is trying to find someone who is flexible. Like Andrew said, they're tenacious, and they're looking for content creation, people that can tell stories. Now, on top of that, you have to know if and measure if those stories are successful or not, but it's storytelling, it's content creation, and measuring what's working and what isn't.
Yeah, I love that. So circling back a bit here, flexibility, tenacious, someone that is looking to, go into their first interview for a marketing role. How would you advise them to build up on those skill sets? What can they do to learn how to be flexible? I know that's probably not the easiest question to throw at you, but what can they do to show that they are flexible and tenacious?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Circling even back to a hard skill, I actually had this conversation with a couple of people on my team yesterday, and I firmly believe, I think Erica would agree, is the one skill that is applicable across the board is copywriting. So it's like, if you want a hard skill, no matter what you're doing, if you know how to write and you can be succinct, you can be creative, you can be interesting, that applies to almost everything else. There's a hard skill that I think is applicable across the board. But your question of, how can somebody talk about or prove, right, flexibility, tenacity? It's, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people over the last couple of years and managed a decent amount. And flexibility, tenacity, it really is just something that, like, when I am hiring or recruiting, managing, it's like you see it, it when it's there. But from a proving perspective early on, I would lean on experience. Like, no matter what it is, what are some of those times that you've had to be flexible, you've had to be tenacious, you've had to see something from A to Z that didn't have a clear roadmap. Those examples, even if they're not marketing specific, sales specific, whatever, it's like that is what somebody can lean on early. And then afterwards, it's, when you have it. And as a manager, I know it when I see it, but I would lean on that experience leading into something like this.
Yeah.
Leaning on what Andrew said, when I've hired and looked for people when we're building teams back when I was in-house and now as an agency, it just goes back to that curiosity and tenacity. Like, if you're curious, right, you're not looking necessarily for like a hard skill set for people who are applying for entry-level positions. It's just if they come to you and have that enthusiasm about learning and growing. They don't necessarily have to have this like perfect picture of how they've worked in marketing before or what they've done necessarily. Yes, you want some stories, but ultimately, like if they're super interested in it and they can prove that through what they're pursuing and what they're learning about in their free time, that alone goes a long way when you're trying to network and get yourself into an entry level position.
That's great. Erica, anything you'd add?
I don't want to keep reiterating the points that have been said, but I do think like for me specifically, I didn't wait until a job was given to me in marketing to get into marketing. I went and build websites on WordPress. I went and started my own stuff to figure out how to build a brand and how to tell that story. And I took that upon myself and fell in love with it. And that's kind of how I fell into marketing. And I think sometimes people can play the victim card or think that like they just expect a job to be handed to them because they've had that experience in the past. But to Mark's point, like get out there, read stuff, learn about it, be in the know. And even if you're not in that role specifically, you could still do stuff on your own.
Yeah. I love that. And I don't want to beat this point, the dead horse here even more, but this question's popped up 3 or 4 times throughout the open Q&A that I think is relevant in this specific theme, which is specifically during the interview as well, but the resume. This has popped up quite a bit. What do you look for when you are hiring an entry level or anyone in marketing? What do you look for on their resume that stands out the most?
I'll be really curious to hear Erica and Mark's thoughts on this, on kind of the new world we live in and resumes and things like that. Speaking to, walking it back just a little bit from what do I look for on a resume, just to kind of round out what Mark and Erica were saying on, being passionate. I think passion plays more in marketing than almost anywhere else inside of business. And you can feel that if somebody's passionate, like that comes through, and that's somebody that you want to hold on to as a marketing leader. Is like, I want to channel that passion. It almost doesn't matter what I need them to do because they'll figure it out. So as it relates to a resume and speaking to maybe entry level, somebody that wants to get in there, and I kind of touched on already, I would be looking for, kind of a proven track record of handling projects, seeing them through, being able to measure them, whatever it is, being able to say, I did X, saw it all the way through here. This is the impact. Somebody that really knows how to follow through, execute, measure results, and combine that with passion. It's like, that's what I would look for. There's not that many from an entry level position kind of across the board. There's so many disciplines in marketing, but across the board, there's not that many hard skills and very specifics like I need to see. If I'm hiring for a position, even if it's entry level across the board, expertise is kind of the bare minimum. Like, does somebody have like the relevant experience for this position? Outside of that, it becomes very, very custom. There's no hard skills because everybody does things differently. So if I'm looking for specifics, it's looking for a track record of seeing projects through, being able to measure it, and then scaling in whatever capacity they were in.
That's great.
Attention to detail is really important to me. If I've taken the time to write a JD and then I get a very generic resume that like doesn't speak to anything on the job description, I'm not probably going to pursue that person any further. If I'm calling out specific skills or things that they need, even if they don't have that like specific marketing role, how can you take your previous experience and twist it to speak to what we're calling out in the JD for what we need? I think a lot of people can confuse like just listing a bunch of skills, just like buzzwords, as being like, oh, these are the skills called out in the JD. I'm just going to put them on the resume. But it's like, no, how did you actually take that skill and apply it in a previous role? What does that look like? What are results that you brought in? And it doesn't, again, need to be specific to you have 10 years of marketing experience, but how can you take your experience to turn it to those skills that we need in this marketing role? And I think that just is attention to detail and reading what we're asking for.
So you're saying customize a resume per job description? Man.
I know, wild. Take those few extra minutes if you actually want the job. There's so many
Yep.
resumes to go through. Those are the ones that stand out, are the ones that actually took the few extra minutes.
I love it.
Well, and also that's like the main skill set of a marketer, right? You're trying to personalize your message to an audience and tailor it for them to hopefully get them to create more actions, right? They are take an action that you want them to take. But I think it's important for those who are listening to know that, like Andrew said, there's kind of two entryways into marketing. Like you kind of have, just like content creation, and then you also have more of the analytical, like media buying or distribution side of it. They call it performance marketing, and they often overlap. So if you're trying to get into marketing, my advice is to take a look at yourself and figure out what you're really good at. Are you better at one or the other thing? Right? Tailor your resume for whatever position you're trying to go for, whether that's more on the analytical side or more on the creative side. And then once you're in those entry-level positions, you need to start working on the other side that you're maybe not as good at. So if you go in analytical, you need to start learning about creative, what ticks, what doesn't. If you're on the creative side, you need to start leaning into your analytical side and figuring out, how do you measure, how do you deem success, how do you plan and strategize for top funnel campaigns and bottom funnel campaigns and post-purchase campaigns. But ultimately, yes, it's tailor making your message and your resume for the kind of entry-level position you're looking for.
I love that. This is a good segue into kind of the next theme. As you both mentioned, Andrew and Mark, there's so many different flavors, varieties, as well as positions within marketing, depending on the role, depending on the job, wherever you're at. So real broad question here. How do you know what is the right transition for you? So if you're in a marketing position, you come in, how do you know what's next? What, am I looking to go into social media, SEO, or web content, or email, or campaign management, whatever, all the other varieties? How do you know what is the right next transition for you?
I think there's so many ways to answer this one. Before you're in a marketing position, I think just going off of what Mark just said, and also Erica, honestly, is really taking a look at yourself, deciding what you like doing, what you're passionate about, what's exciting to you, what are those angles in, and then go after that. Because once you're in that entry level position, if you have a good manager or a good leader, like that path is pretty clear. If the goal was to, hey, I just need to get into marketing, I know I'm passionate, I don't totally know where I want to end up. One, I'll just say that, at least from my experience, and again, startup world, that's very common. It's like you have a lot of these really creative, passionate, tenacious people who are really kind of full field marketers. They don't totally know what they're doing. They just know how to execute and get things done. That's very common. And that's how I got into marketing. I don't think that's a problem. So when you say, all right, what's next? The first thing I would say is, no matter what industry you want to get in, size of company, exact role, really hone in on like, who is my manager? Who is my leader here? That person is critical, to helping, you scale your career and your experience if you know what you want to do. And they're even more critical if you're not totally sure what you want to do. That person will be, the lifeline of experience. If they care and they're authentic, really digging into what do you want to do, and I will help you define that. So the first thing I would say is really, really hone in on who the manager is and who the leader is, because marketing changes so quickly. There's so many things that are, out of control from a marketing side. So you have to be nimble and change. And that leader is very, very crucial to helping somebody navigate that who's new to marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to understand about a marketing career is that marketing is all about trying to achieve specificity results, but being comfortable with ambiguity, right? Because there's so many variables at play with all the efforts that you are going to do. There's a million things that could be happening over a digital channel, right? You're not the only influence out there, but you have to measure and be successful with that. So that's just the name of the game in marketing it's not always a clear path forward, even in your career, because things are always changing. But what we look for and what I look for is someone who is willing to fail and test and move on. So if you don't know where you're going, that's totally fine. Again, it goes back to the original point. If you're tenacious and flexible, and you're willing to give some things a shot and figure out where you fit once you get in, start with your strength to get in. Once you're in, give things a shot. It's okay if you fail. Your leader is not going to be mad at you. A good marketing leader, like Andrew said, loves to see someone trying new things and extending themselves, even if they're failing. And then you'll find where you fit along the way.
I love that.
I think to that end, I tend to push people towards startups for their first marketing role, just because you get such a variety of experience, because there's usually 1 to 2 people. And so you're taking on the role of a lot of people, but you get to experience so many different areas of marketing that you likely wouldn't if you went into a more like paying company, where it's like you're focused on this specific area, and you might not have a ton of visibility into other areas of marketing that you end up liking more. So I think if it is your first marketing role, if you don't have a ton of marketing experience, getting your foot in the door at a startup, knowing that you probably are going to be working a lot and juggling a lot, so being ready for that, but also if you're excited, if you're wanting to experience all the different areas of marketing, then that's a good place to start.
I'm biased, but yeah, I push people who want to get into marketing startups exactly for that reason.
Yeah. Which is actually a question that we got asked, which is, what is the best way to expose yourself to the very different roles in marketing without stepping on your manager or other people's toes? I'm assuming, Erica, Andrew, you'd recommend startups for that exact question?
Yeah, I would round that out exactly to what we've said is 1, find the right leader, and 2, get into startups and be willing to try and fail. That's the best way. Get into startups, make sure you're confident in your leader. Don't be afraid to try.
Yeah. And to be fair, my first jump into marketing was at a startup, right? So that's how I was able to test and jump into it from a sales career, right? I was in sales as an inside sales manager. I just graduated from the U, and I decided to jump into marketing. Well, it was a startup. Things were changing. There was multiple things to do, and that's how I got started, right? Startups are willing to take a risk too on people, because startups are inherently risky. So that's the con, is it's a risky move because you just don't know how a startup's going to pan out necessarily, but the reward is far greater than the risk for your career.
That's amazing. So this kind of goes right along this same thread. How did each of you know what the right trajectory was for you? You know, what the next step, what the transition was? Was it something you'd known, since you started in marketing, or was it an opportunity that popped up and you were there to fill it? How did each of you know what was the right path?
I feel like I always talk first, so I'll let Erica or Mark on this one.
The right
So
path
nice.
in terms of like going into marketing or going into a more leadership role?
Yeah, once you're in marketing, how did you know which path to take from there?
I think for me in startup experience, I had a ton on my plate and I knew what I wanted off of my plate. I knew what I didn't enjoy, where I would love to have help in people owning that area. Maybe I like to have the oversight into the strategy, but I don't want to be the one executing on certain areas of marketing and just not thrilled by it. So that was my own experience. And that's why I push people to startups, because then you very quickly learn what you like and don't like. And then I think to going into a leadership role, that just comes from like previous experience in other roles. Like even as a teenager being like a camp counselor or being more in like that leadership position with other people. I've always enjoyed that, being the oldest of five, just life experiences.
So more of a elimination rather than I know exactly what I want. I knew exactly what I didn't want to be doing, and that helped coach or guide that. I like that.
Yeah, I kind of fell into it a little bit. I moved into marketing. I knew I wanted to go in there. Started out in like the CRO realm and like SEO realm, and then the startup had layoffs, and then I had to take over all of paid search and paid media. So once I took that over, I just kind of fell into it, and within 1 month, I was able to decrease our cost per acquisition by like 50% and increase conversion volume by, I think it was like 80%. So I fell into that and just felt like I was naturally good at it. And that'll happen oftentimes in your career too. You might just fall into a role, and like Erica said, she had a lot on her plate. I wasn't necessarily thinking I'd go into paid performance, but I just kind of fell into it and discovered I was good at it. And then if you're good at it, people will recognize that you're good at it. So whatever happens in your career, you're going to know if you're good at it, and other people will recognize if you're good at it really, really quickly.
Great point. Great point. So yeah, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And me and Mark were actually at the same company back then that triggered our interest in marketing. And I was also a sales rep there. And I remember looking at leads one day and being like, where did the leads come from? And I don't even know who. They're like, the marketing team. I was like, what is marketing? Next day, I did a little bit of research. Like, actually, I think this is what I want to do. I'm like a sales driven, competitive person, but I'm also a creative. This sounds like it could be great. So I called everybody I knew who could be in marketing and could know somebody in marketing, and grabbed an internship as quickly as I could. Like we said at the top, my first thing was organizing the closet, and accomplished that. And then after that, I just really jumped into everything. It's like anything I could get my hands on, whether that was events, product marketing, content, anything I could touch, I just wanted to touch it. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I fell in love and I was passionate about marketing, and it evolved over time. And the only thing I really felt semi-strongly about was I wanted to be a more general marketer. I wanted to have some very specific skill sets and expertise, but I wanted to be general because I loved being able to touch everything. I loved being able to work with every different department within marketing. So I knew that, but outside of that, it was falling in love with marketing and then taking chances and trying and just kind of trusting that like, this is what I want to do. And here we are.
That's awesome. Cool. This is a good transition point into our last theme, and then we'll go into more open Q&A just to make sure we're staying on time. So our last theme is those that are looking into a leadership role, making transition into a first-time leader, or from a team lead manager into more of a department leader, director, VP in that type of role, or more of an entrepreneurial type role. The first question I want to start with is, how do you know someone's ready to be a leader?
How do they handle stress? Are they solution oriented? Like, I feel like there's a lot of like, if you put someone in a tricky situation, how do they react to it? If someone panics, if they just like freeze and don't know how to handle anything, if they're not providing solutions to a problem, to me, I wouldn't want to put them in a leadership role, because I would worry that people would be looking to them for said solution, or, hey, that we have a problem, how can we fix it? And they're not able to provide that guidance. I think that's a big one on my end. I also feel like being able to admit when you don't know something, having like, you can be confident, but having a little bit of humility and understanding of like, I might not be the strongest in XYZ. Let me go and ask someone. A good leader is able to turn to other people and make sure that they have the best answer, not always that they're providing, like they're the ones that are providing the answer per se.
That's great.
Yeah, I love that. Going off of that, I know, as as a leader. I know everything that I'm dealing with. I know the stress, the ambiguity, the responsibility, the pressure. I know that. So when I'm thinking about leaders kind of across disciplines, and again, to not keep it too theoretical or too soft skill, it's like expertise is a given in that domain. Like, are they clearly, the, expert in that domain for our use case right now? So if that's there, knowing everything I have to deal with, and exactly what Erica said, I need, leaders who also know how to manage that stress, manage that ambiguity, and can manage themselves and manage their teams and groups. If not, then my job is harder, and then anybody under that new leader, their jobs are harder as well. And the other piece I was going to add to that, I forgot. So Mark, you go. I'll think about it. I have one other point.
Yeah, a hard scale, like a clear hard scale for me is measuring. Right? Can you give clear answers for why things are working and not working? And then be honest if you don't know. Because guess what? It's totally fine if you don't know. It just explain why you don't know and what you'll do to know. So measuring is a hard skill that all leaders have to have, because when you advance in a company, for example, marketing is the department that people don't pay attention to, and then when they do pay attention to, everybody's the expert, right? So you'll have sales coming in, you'll have like a CEO jump in, you'll have a CTO jump in, and everybody's an expert all of a sudden at marketing. So you have to know how to give clear and concise answers and talk to all of these different people without getting worked up, because it's really easy to get prideful and worked up. So what we look for in somebody who wants to be a leader is somebody that can give concise answers, not get worked up, not get super defensive, know how to handle those situations, because that's a situation you're going to be in. You're going to have to work across departments, like Andrew was talking about, all of the time. And when you do, everybody's an expert. So how do you handle those relationships, and how do you nurture relationships, and how do you know how to measure success so you can give clear answers and shut people down when the time comes about what is the best move forward? And then, as what Erica said, it's somebody who knows how to self-start and come up with their own solutions and plans. If you need someone to come to you and tell you every step to take, that's great if you're an executioner and you do it all, but that's not good enough to be a leader. You have to come up with your own plans and how you're going to attack a problem.
Yeah, that was a much more articulate way of talking about what I meant with expertise, right? And that point is so valuable, and it goes all the way back to somebody who wants to get into marketing. Focusing on data and measurement, no matter what you're doing, that is one of the hardest things to do in marketing, and to do it in a very clear way because of all of the disciplines that sit underneath it. So can a leader not only do they know what they're doing, can they measure it specifically? Can they talk about it? That's how they lead the rest of their teams. So much more articulate way, Mark, of saying like expertise, focusing on measurement. And then that goes all the way back, like I said, to somebody who just wants to get into marketing. Focus on data early, focus on measurement early, really make that second nature no matter what you're doing. So by the time, you are in a leadership position, you know exactly like what we need to do, why we need to do it, how we measure, how we change, how we collaborate. And the last thing I was going to say on things I look for, and I think this is more ambiguous. Wow. Is buy-in from other people on the team. A clear leader, how the people around them, no matter if they're on the same team or not, how they feel about that person. Will they go to bat for that person? Will they, stay up nights if they have to for that person? Those people. So networking and marketing and internal networking, I feel like, is probably one of the most underlooked and underappreciated kind of skills.
That's great. And not to beat this horse, but this question's come up quite a bit. What can people be doing today is the question that's coming up. If I'm applying for a manager role, if I'm trying to get into that promotion, what can I be doing today in my role to be more qualified to receive that promotion or be the next manager?
I'll answer quickly on my side. If you have that question, you probably know that there's things that you're not doing or need to do better, right? You should have enough self-awareness in those cases. Like if I have to ask, how do I get this, or why haven't I been promoted to this yet? Let's start with like looking internally and be like, okay, do I know there's things that I can get better at? And then there's the opposite side of that is, yeah, maybe it's a different environment. It's kind of hard. You do have to push to say, okay, this is, something I want. This is how I get it. And it goes back to data, success, metrics, being able to say, hey, this is why I should do this. Here are the reasons, and keep it very performance focused. That's what I, would suggest there.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Andrew was saying, you got two situations. You might be applying for a separate company that you're not currently at for that promotion or that advanced position, or you might be trying to apply internally for a promotion. So unfortunately, like if you're applying internally, just think about how your relationship is with your teammates, and with your manager and the people who are hiring, right? You might have the quantitative story to back up why you deserve it. But if you haven't worked those relationships and proven how you can work with other people, then that's going to be what you should work on right now. If you can work with other people and you're great at that, but you don't really have like a success story that's proven through measurement. And by the way, success story isn't you raised revenue by 100% all the time. It can be, hey, we tried X, Y, and Z. We failed. We did this. We succeeded. This is how I've grown. This is how I can help other people grow, right? It's not necessarily this like, I 10x'd a company once. But it's just measurement and knowing how to measure and then figure out what you're lacking, right? Does your story lack the quantitative, or does your story and your selling point lack the personal work with other teams? Because again, that's all marketing is. You have to work with everybody. Marketing is unique because you are interdependent on every other department. And it kind of sucks sometimes, but that's just the nature of the beast. So if you can't work with other people, it's going to be tough.
I love that.
I think to Mark's point, people can love you. You can be the most popular in the company. If you don't have results to back up what you're doing, I think that those go hand in hand. And I think this has been reiterated time and time again. If you're in an executional role, like for example, a copywriter, and you feel like you don't know how your copy has made an impact on the business, start asking those questions, start following up with paid, start following up with whoever is tracking landing pages or whatever you're writing to, email, what have you, ask. If that's not in place, that's probably a fault of whoever's managing said distribution channel, but like you should be able to tell that story. So ask those questions if you feel like you don't have that tracking in place, if you can't really tell that story of the results that you're bringing into a business. And I think good leaders ask questions too.
Can I give a personal story about what Erica just said?
No way.
No way. It's not about me. It's about someone I worked with. So she was a creative, right? So I didn't manage her directly, but she was creative and she was looking for a promotion, and she was sending out her resumes, and she came over to me because I was the director of digital marketing. I had all the measurements, right? I was the analytic guy at this company. And she said, hey, I'm trying to figure out like what the performance was on all the things I did. So I had to pull up all of her ads that she helped, all of the landing pages that she helped with, all of like, what was the impact of her creative output? And I put that together for her. And then she got a great opportunity at a startup, within 3 weeks. So what Erica said is spot on. Like I have just a personal example of someone I worked with who did that. She was a creative person, kind of shy, I guess you could say, or an introvert. She wasn't necessarily like this exuberant, outgoing person, but she knew how to make connections. She knew how to show that measurement and that performance, and she got out of her box to talk with people and work with other departments, and she got an awesome promotion because of it.
Yeah, and I think this topic is really interesting. So sorry to just respond quickly.
Great.
I think one thing too that is really important is really evaluating yourself and understanding the difference between promotion and leadership. Do you want to lead people? Do you like that idea, or do you just want to scale more in your own career? Those are always two different options. And I've seen a lot of people aspiring to leadership because of leadership, not necessarily they want to advance their career or, get better in their specific discipline. They wanted leadership. And those are the type of people that, in most cases, they don't have the buy-in from their team because that's all they wanted. So really understanding, do I want leadership? If so, why? Or do I just want to advance? Do I want promotions? Do I want to scale? Both are fine. But I don't think enough people think about the difference between those two. And one personal note too, going off of what Mark said, and actually this is Erica's point too about, kind of being loved, like you can be the most loved person at a company, but does that mean you're the most effective leader? And one of the best pieces of advice I got from the CRO at Route, I was early-ish on there. The team had grown and we were talking about leadership and some really hard things that we had coming. And very simply put, he said to me, he's like, your team loves you. People love you, but do they trust you and respect you enough to hate you for a minute and still love you long-term? That was a really interesting thing for me to hear. Is leadership isn't about just people and like being popular and being whatever. It's like, it's hard, so really digging into, do I want to be in leadership or do I just want to scale personally? Both are fine, but it's an interesting thing. And I think natural leaders will find their way into it. And yeah, it comes with a lot of challenges, but I would think about it earlier on in your career. Is that what I aspire to do? Or do I just am I really passionate about this thing and I want to scale personally? Both are fine, but they're very different.
Yeah, that's spot on, Andrew, because the secret is you don't have to be a leader to make a lot of money in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're really good at just a specialist role, like let's say you just are awesome at copywriting, but you don't want to manage people, because managing people and dealing with people brings on a whole new set of time commitment. It's hard. You're dealing with other things, but you're just like, I'm so good at copywriting. You can turn that into a very lucrative career, just copywriting. You could be the best copywriter out there. Or if you're really good at just analytics, you can service 10 companies just running their analytics and you can make a killing. So it's not necessarily leadership is the only pathway forward to making more money, but leadership is a way to impact more people potentially, right? And help other people. So I think what Andrew said is really interesting, because yeah, it's not like just because you don't go into leadership doesn't mean your career isn't successful.
Yeah, this is great. And sorry, any other last thoughts before we go into that? Erica, I saw your
I was just going to say,
microphone come
speaking
on.
as someone who's hiring someone in these specialist roles, I want to hire someone who's smarter than me. I want to hire someone who's going to make me better. So if you're really great at what you do, that's awesome. And you can progress, to Mark's point, like in that role, and help up level everyone around you just by being really great at what you do. And everyone can turn to you for analytics, for copywriting, for whatever it is. Because really good people in specialist roles are really hard to find. That's why you spend so long interviewing and you spend so long going through resumes, because that is hard to find. So I think it's definitely to Andrew's point, you can progress either way.
I love this. This has been great. Thank you guys. This is a great topic. And I apologize to everyone, the participants. We're not going to get through all of the questions that have been asked. We've had a lot of questions come in. And so we've got a few that we've kind of rifled through and want to open into the open Q&A portion. This apparently is on a lot of people's minds. What is your advice working with a difficult sales leader? This has come up about 10 different times in the Q&A now.
This is great. Yeah, there's always natural tension, marketing, sales, partnerships in SaaS. So speaking for SaaS startups, there's always some tension. It gets all the way down to like go-to-market strategy, attribution. There's always a little bit of tension there, regardless of how good relationships are. But how do you deal with a difficult sales leader? Every startup I've ever joined, the first person, I would say the first two people that I immediately, dedicate a lot of time to and hopefully become very close with is the head of sales and head of CS. After that, it's head of product and down the list, but head of sales, head of CS. Marketing is a revenue organization that is reliant on sales, customer success, and those adjacent groups. Those two people and subsequent leaders, those are my main focus always. So if you're in a position right now where you're dealing with a hard head of sales, really try to understand why. Is it a process thing? Is it a strategy thing? Is it just general tension? Have you invested enough in that relationship? And sometimes it's just hard, but from my experience, if you dedicate that time and really collaborate with that person, it becomes pretty clear. We only care about revenue. I can't hit my goals unless sales hit their goals and unless CS and support, are keeping these people on. So it's all tied. And being the person who says, we're going to break that down and I'm going to be close with these people. If you're in a situation where it doesn't feel that way, it's going to make everybody's life better.
Yeah, I would add that your job, use your skills as a marketer, right? Like your job as a marketer is to influence people. So you're trying to influence like real human beings out there, right? It's not just like numbers. So if you're good at influencing people through your messaging and through your content and understanding what their needs are, right? You're trying to meet a need. And so you're trying to understand what their pain points are. Try to understand what your sales leader pain points are. Because unfortunately, sales leaders often have the most pressure, right? So they have often feel more pressure than marketing teams directly from like a CEO or whatever. Understand why they feel that pressure, right? Kind of leave your ego at the door and get to know them and try to figure out like how you can alleviate that pressure for them. Like as dumb as that sounds, right? Because sometimes I get it, right? Like sales guys can be intense, but I was in there, like I know sales guys. But if you can figure out a way and understand why they're being difficult, well, address that and create a message to that for them. That's a marketing skill. If you can do that successfully, like Andrew said, then that relationship will get better. And ultimately, you're both working towards the same goal. So it doesn't need to be a fight.
That's great.
I think to both points, like as you're building that relationship, are you celebrating in the wins together, or are you only talking when things are going bad? Like, is it always a negative relationship because you're always talking when someone needs something, or like when something's going wrong? Or is there more of that camaraderie? And to that end, are you planning and working towards shared objectives, like on both teams, or are teams operating in silos and teams have different, sure, at the end of the day, bringing in revenue, but what specific goals are each team working towards, and are they shared in kind of the overall strategy to an extent? Obviously, it's going to be different for sales than marketing, but have you aligned with the leader on how you're envisioning the teams can get there together? And there should be planning in place. You shouldn't just come in and hit the ground running and not have a plan, but that should be done simultaneously. And you should be celebrating when you reach those milestones collectively, instead of just taking it as, hey, this is a marketing, we're going to go celebrate over here, sales. Goodbye.
Yeah, can I give a concrete example for what you're saying there, Erica? So at the startup I worked at, there was a lot of clashing between sales and marketing. So marketing came up with this idea of creating a test team on sales to try to get better leads for sales, right? Sales was bought in because they're like, oh, sweet, like we can give our best reps some of the best leads and test out different lead sources. So what that did is it established trust between marketing and sales, because sales understood that marketing was trying to get them better leads, and they were trying to test through some things to make sure that it was an easier process for sales, right? So it was addressing one of the sales pain points so they could celebrate together on those wins. And it was really successful, because what worked on that little test pod was then migrated to the entire sales team, which only helped everybody. But they were celebrating and working on the same thing. So like, that's a concrete example of what Erica's saying is, of course, everybody wants more revenue, but that was something where they came together and decided, hey, we want to help your team out. We're trying to get better leads, but we just have to test them through this funnel. And that worked wonders for that company at the time.
That's awesome. One last point, just to round out Erica and Mark's. Something I've realized over the years too is marketing has access to a lot of other things that sales don't. They just don't have access. So a breakthrough I had with a sales leader was really sitting down with him saying, what is kind of the key challenge you have right now? And it was bigger enterprise accounts. They couldn't get them over the line. So we chatted for a minute. It's like, okay, marketing has access to all these different things, whether it's content, events, sponsorships, co-branded stuff. Like, let's see how marketing can help push this over. We won a few of those deals. Things like that go a long way. So really understanding what their pains are and showing that you're invested in them, it goes a long way, and it does wonders to shift a relationship that's not amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. So we'll probably have time for one more question. We had a lot of great questions. One that I want to get to because of my nature of loving retention and churn was, what is your position in retention, and how do you build a retention strategy? But we'll save that one hopefully for next time. This one comes up quite a bit, is what is the most important metric to be tracking in marketing, and why?
The correct answer is it depends. And
all right, Mark, let's hear it.
And every marketer, like going back to like leadership positions, right? And like knowing this good marketers from like average, is good marketers say it depends, because everything is contextual in marketing. It depends on the objective. It depends on the industry. It depends on, what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, if you're a new company and you're just trying to get your name out there, well, you know that all of the scientific literature points to repetition equaling truth, meaning touch points matter. So the amount of touch points you get with a potential customer matters. It's hard to measure that though. So you can't necessarily say we're looking for revenue. It's, hey, how many times can we hit people with our message for now? So that might be an awareness campaign. So like the most important metric there isn't necessarily revenue or leads or closed leads. It just depends, right? If you're in a lead generation business, well, yes, revenue is the most important, but for marketing, it might just be leads qualified, because maybe you don't have that much control down the funnel of actual revenue. If you're in e-commerce, well, it's easy because you're sending people to a site and you know if that's becoming revenue or not. So for e-commerce, it's revenue, right? But it just depends on what business you're in, what the objective is for that marketing campaign, and where the company is.
Yeah, makes sense.
And just off of that, just to give, like, totally agree with Mark. The right answer is it depends. Comes down to context and really understanding what you're trying to do. But for the sake of the question, and if we have one answer, it's what is the company objective, whether this is a quarter or a year, if that's revenue, new logos, like what is the company objective? Anything you measure below all needs to line up to that. So that's the one thing I would say is, what is the company objective? And if that's not there, nothing else matters. And that is the guiding metric for marketing. And then everything else falls underneath it. But it always depends.
Yeah, I can just say the same thing. But I think if you understand the goal of whatever you're working on and understand, like, okay, did we succeed in said goal? I think especially in startup environments, you can outline a goal, you can outline this is what we're going to do, and then you launch it and then you never look at it again. So if you're not actually measuring anything, if you're not actually laddering back to whatever said goal was, then you really aren't measuring the success, and you can't tell that story of what's working and what's not.
This is great. We are out of time. Thank you, Andrew, Erica, Mark. I really appreciate you being our experts for today and answering all these questions. Everyone that participated and asked all of your questions, thank you for your participation. Again, apologize we weren't able to get to even half the questions that came in. Genuinely appreciate all of the participation and engagement that the three of you brought to our expert chats today. Anyone that's participating, please go and follow these three on LinkedIn. These are amazing mentors and industry experts. If you need patterns to follow in your own career, these three would be excellent people to pattern your career after. So please reach out to them. Sorry in advance, Andrew, Eric, and Mark, if you get a barrage of messages from the participants, but really appreciate the three of you carving out an hour to speak with our audience today. So thanks again, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, y'all.
Everyone.